Hello, everyone. It's Lotus Moon. Well, it's finally time. It's finally time to get to the final chapter of Fireteam Odium. It's been a long journey to get this far, and honestly, it could have been, a bit easier had I been more frequent in reading this story. By the time I started, honestly, it wasn't yet finished, and when I found out that it was finished, I still put it off, which is really bad of me, and I am very, very sorry for that. But now, this long road is going to come to an end. The war is over, and now it's finally time to start to rebuild. Let's see what happens now. Let's begin. Fireteam Odium, written by Atranos the Last. Chapter 30, the final chapter. Home. The ruins of Manhattan smoldered as Luna wandered slowly through the streets. The corpses of ponies and cabal alike piled on either side of her as far as the eye could see. The remaining frames from the bunkers had been working to push them aside, opening the streets to the beings and vehicles that would be needed in order to clean them. Looking up, many of the buildings had fallen, a result of the combined firepower from the Cabal ships and equestrian armies. Those that still stood were filled with holes wide enough to fit multiple ponies through at the same time. As she turned onto the main street, Chrome trotted up by her side, joining her in her silent walk of the city. It was many blocks in before she broke the silence. I cannot help but be reminded of Canterlot. Chrome nodded. I can see why, but we can rebuild Manhattan. It might be a bit harder to do the same for Canterlot. Very true. Luna looked into a wrecked store to the left of her, the pile of bodies just low enough to see inside. The partly skeletal remains of the ponies that once worked there lay near the inner walls, the Cabal not seeing any reason to move them from the buildings they had no intention of using. How can a race be so cruel? The Cabal can't really be blamed for something the Primus chose for them. Just a shame we couldn't end it without bloodshed. Luna hummed. They had a choice and they made it. Those that made the correct choice will live on now, and those that did not will be nothing but food for the earth. That drew a raised eyebrow from Chrome. A little dark, no? She chuckled a little. I'm a princess. I'm allowed a moment or two to speak my mind, especially in times like these. Of course, wasn't trying to take that away. Luna smiled down at the unicorn. I know. Perhaps you should return to the Guardians. No doubt they will have use of your skill in some way. Chrome hesitated, but gave a nod, teleporting away to the bunker and leaving Luna to continue wandering the city, something she would do long into the next morning. Curvis's vision was slow to return, though some mumbled curses and a couple of head smacks seemed to do the trick. When he could see, he found himself in a small, single-bed medical tent, no doubt placed here instead of the larger medical tent for fear of what would happen to his body without his ghost. He swung his legs around and off the bed, giving himself a look over. His armor plating had been stripped and placed carefully near his bed. He'd been left in nothing but his underarmor, a relatively thin suit of ballistic fabric and light metals. The tent itself was simple, something that could be quickly deployed in an emergency. Just a frame cot and some antiquated-looking medical equipment. He gently picked his broken helmet up, giving it a look over. The once vibrant green glow flickered, now barely visible. The face section was shattered, a couple of holes here and there. It was lucky that none of the fragments hit his face. Without a ghost, the recovery process would be long and probably painful. The tent flaps opened as he checked over the other pieces of his armor. Exodus walking in and sitting on the cot beside him. The weak frame creaked a bit, bending down with the added weight of the exo. "How's your head?" he asked, picking up the helmet Curvis put aside. "I'm fine. My armor took the hit well enough," Curvis responded, looking to his friend. Exodus had taken far less of a beating than Curvis, but his tattered robes revealed he wasn't unscathed. "We'll have to find you a new set. It might be hard without the tower supply, though." Curvis sighed. "I have a set in storage. I'll pick it up when we find a way back. Speaking of which, we still have no idea how to do that. Our focus left the prospect of returning home pretty quickly when we found the Cabal." The Titan shrugged, picking his pulse rifle up and frowning at the state of it. "It's Vex Tech. They wouldn't leave themselves stranded here." Exodus fiddled with a scrap of cloth on his robe, ignoring Curvis's failed attempts to load a magazine into the dented magwell. "Perhaps they constructed portals here too?" Curvis slammed the magazine into the magwell, the force being enough to fix the dents to the point that the magazine scraped in. "Maybe, but wouldn't a bunch of alien tech be something the ponies would bring up with us?" The exo suppressed a shudder at the sound the magazine made, rolling his eyes as Curvis started yanking on the end of the mag, suddenly realizing his mistake. Standing, Exodus replied, "Not if they don't think it's alien." Curvis soon gave up trying to retrieve the stuck magazine, setting it aside and slowly standing, giving a thankful nod when Exodus moved over to help him stand upright. "What do you have in mind?" "Not Princess. Twilight. She seemed interested in history and the like. She might have an idea of where to look." "Who?" "I've met a lot of princesses in the time we've been here," looking down at the mess of gear he'd been left with. "The purple one. Smaller than the others." It took a moment for him to process the memories. "Oh, her. I don't remember talking with her, but I saw her following you around, thinking she was being stealthy." Exodus chuckled. She seemed fascinated by new things. No doubt the arrival of aliens was a major turn of events for her. "I'll try to find her. Meanwhile, you should rest. I have no idea what will happen to your body now that you have no ghost. And so I'd rather you don't go running around on more adventures until we know for sure you won't just collapse on us." Curvis huffed. "Fine, but I'm finding Lemon first." The warlock placed a hand on his shoulder. "I need a promise from you that you won't go wandering off to punch something. You know, not all Titans punch things. You've been wearing a pair of gauntlets that boosts how much light you can push into your punches," Exodus retorted, nodding a bit to the massive shoulder guards, the gauntlets laying against them. This drew a second huff from the human. "Doesn't prove anything." That was a moment's silence, drawing Curvis's attention up to Exodus's expectant face. He'd even bought out the foot tap, something Curvis hadn't seen since the time they'd fought Crota. Fine, no punching anything." Exodus nodded, patting Curvis on the shoulder and leaving the tent, and giving his partner enough time to work out how he'd present himself. He finally settled on going out in just his under armor, figuring that his damaged plating would make him look more hurt than he actually was. Leaving the tent, he found himself in the field of tents that was set up after Canterlot fell. Ponies were still being moved to homes, but with how many there were compared to the amount of available housing, the process was slow. He barely took a step forward before being tackled by a yellow blur, Lemon happily cuddling him when he was sufficiently pinned. "Hey there," Curvis chuckled. "I was leaving to find you." "I couldn't wait around anymore," Lemon replied, giving him a happy smile. How are you? Exodus told me you were hurt and lost your little ghost thing. The Titan grunted, gently moving her so he could stand and dust himself off. Feeling a lot better than I probably should. Took a pretty heavy hit, so my armor's wrecked. I'd rather have wrecked armor than a hurt Curvis. Understandable. Why exactly did they move me here instead of the bunker? Lemon scrunched a bit. I don't really know. They put you in a single tent to keep you from accidentally hurting other ponies. Just in case. But they kept you in a place full of other ponies. Curvis sighed. I'm sure there's some reason behind it, especially if Exodus is involved. Come on. We should head back to the bunker. Without thinking, he raised his hand, looking at his palm with a slow understanding of why it remained empty. After a few moments, he closed his hand, looking back at Lemon. I don't suppose you have any teleport we can use. Ponyville was rather quiet, which wasn't really a surprise to Exodus. Many of the ponies had left town to a gathering a mile away to mourn those that were lost and celebrate their victory. Those that were left tried their best to continue their daily lives, only a couple even acknowledging his presence as he walked through their town, in the direction of the towering castle on the edge of it. Turning on a street, he noticed a large crater, bits of what was once a home littering the sides of it. With the lack of smoke, he could almost assume it was a stray shot from a past battle, possibly Canterlot. Shaking his head, he silently vowed to help the ponies that lost everything in the war the Cabal brought. They deserved help, and it was likely that the pony hierarchy would be slow to respond thanks to the poor state it had been left in. He pressed on, arriving at the castle's front door only a few minutes later. Giving a few knocks, he stood back a little, waiting patiently for who he assumed would be a servant. Instead of a servant, however, Twilight opened the door herself, flinging it open wider when she recognized who was there.
Oh, Exodus, right?
She questioned, looking over him. That's right. I hope I'm not disturbing you, he replied, standing still to let the curious pony look over his armor.
Not at all. I just have a little bit of paperwork to sort through, helping to smooth things out for the princesses, you see.
Exodus nodded. Makes sense. Mind if I speak with you inside? I have something I think you could help me with. She beamed up at him.
Of course. Please, come in.
She stepped aside and allowed him entry, standing close to his side as he stepped in, getting a close look at the tattered material of his robes. See something interesting? He asked, taking his helmet off and looking down at her.
Sorry, I've just never seen material like this,
she sheepishly responded. I'll tell you about it some other time. I'm afraid my priority right now is getting our situation sorted. Twilight led the way into the castle, talking as she walked.
Speaking of which, what exactly did you need help with?
We think there may be technology on your planet that could help us return home. The beings that constructed the portals that sent us here will likely have built structures here too, mostly to help keep a solid link to a planet they might be able to terraform. She gave him an uncertain look.
Terraform? Why would they do that?
Exodus shrugged. Not really sure. I suppose they prefer planets that way. Twilight hummed, taking him into the library and offering him a seat at the table. He had to shift a bit to sit in it properly, with it being designed more for ponies.
I think I have some books that might help, though I'm not sure how much you'll find,
she said, flying up to the bookshelves.
You are the first aliens we've ever discovered.
It's likely that the technology is hidden to keep it out of the way. It would cause problems for the beings if you had found it and learned how to manipulate it, Exodus explained, looking around the room. Even he had to admit he was impressed by the size of the place. Twilight returned with a few books.
These are probably your best bet. Want help reading them?
Exodus stared at her for a moment. You want to help me read books? First time I've heard that. She sat in a chair next to him.
Really? You don't have people that like books where you come from?
Oh, we do. Just none that I work with.
That's a shame. I love reading. The knowledge you can get from a single book is fascinating to me.
The alicorn commented, opening a book from the pile inside the first page. I have to agree, Exodus said, opening the next book in the pile. Maybe I'll convince Elena to... He stopped before he finished his sentence, gazing hard at the symbols that lined the page. Right. Probably should have thought about that. Twilight looked up.
What's wrong?
I can't read your language. Like, it's a miracle we can even speak the same language, to be fair. She scrunched up a bit.
Sorry. Want me to look for you?
I feel that you may have to. I won't be much help, sadly. Exodus sighed, closing the book and setting it back on the pile. Giving him a kind smile, she continued reading.
Care to talk about the material now?
Oh, I suppose. We have plenty of time on our hands. Twilight giggled, giving him a glance, and continued to read.
That we do.
Elena sat on a chair outside the bunker, tinkering with her sniper when Prochor joined her. Looking up, she smiled at him. Hey, big guy. Feeling alright? He took a chair from nearby and sat with her. About as good as someone that nearly lost a friend. Keyword, nearly. Elena replied, putting the magazine into her rifle and setting it aside. You did good up there. Better than expected, Prochor stated, leaning forward a bit. Elena nodded, looking out at the field surrounding the bunker.
Thanks. Though I thought I was gonna miss every shot with that golden gun.
Yet you didn't. Callus taught you well.
She did. Just wish she was here to teach me more,
she said in response, looking down at the battered sniper by her side. Prochor turned his attention to the sky, watching the distant Pegasi move cargo from the nearby towns to assist those that needed aid. Guardians aren't invincible. Understanding that before you enter combat will help to give each action you take meaning. Elena looked at him sadly.
But it's exactly that thought that scares me every day. Khalees was an experienced hunter, and Curvis is even more so than her. Yet both either died or nearly died in that war.
And it's the job of the less experienced guardians to take their place and succeed where they didn't. When a guardian dies, it's for a purpose, even if the guardian himself doesn't realize it. The hunter managed a weak chuckle.
Some might see that as a bit morbid.
Prochor laughed a little in return. Our jobs are morbid. Hardly anything new for me. The duo fell into a comfortable silence, gazing across the fields of green grass and spotted trees. It was some time before Elena spoke again. I heard Exodus was looking for a way home. So did I. I'd wonder how long it would be before he gave up taking a break. She nodded once more. He never struck me as someone that likes to sit around doing nothing. What do you think you'll end up doing, now that everything's said and done? I need to go back. Now that the Vanguard have gotten themselves to another situation that they need digging out of, Prochor replied, giving his gauntlet a look over. What about you?
I think I'll stay here. The tower was my only home for a short period, and I never really did anything of meaning there. I've got friends here, people and ponies I can rely on, and beings that can use my help,
Elena explained, watching him as he checked his armor over.
Prokhor gave her an understanding smile. Makes sense. Zavala won't be happy about it, but there's not much he could do to stop you in the end. What about your ghost? Elena cocked her head a bit. My ghost? Yeah, from the ghosts I've seen, they are pretty tensely in favor of protecting the traveler. Oh, she muttered. He's not as okay with it as I would have liked, but with how young I am, I think he understands my reasoning. I hope he does at least. The traveler is important, indescribably so to our ghosts. Your ghost, however, isn't you. If you want to make a choice that decides your future, that's not for him to decide. The Titan patted her arm gently. If you want to stay, then stay. She smiled widely at him. Thanks, Prokhor, that means a lot. Said Titan stood up, fixing his armor back onto his body. Not a problem. Gotta help somehow, right? Don't be silly, Elena said, still smiling as she stood up with him. We likely wouldn't have managed to win without you. Prokhor simply chuckled. If you say so. Come on, we should probably see what sort of trouble Flames got himself into. Trouble? He didn't seem like a pony that could get into trouble when I spoke with him. He's changed a lot since Odium first met him, from how Exodus and Khalees described him. Prokhor explained. Though from my experience with people like him, he's sure to have found something to get into trouble with. Just need to find out what. Elena gave a confused nod. Alright then, I suppose we should go find him. Hey, at the very least, it's something to do until Exodus finds that Vex tech. Let's go. Not being able to argue with that logic, Elena stood, holstering her sniper and following her fellow guardian, giving one last look to the field before focusing on the path ahead of them. Exodus rode his sparrow in silence, the only sounds being that of the wind battering his robes and the roaring engine behind him. With the help of twilight, he had managed to pinpoint a few areas with some promise, though it had taken a few hours to do so. He had already been to 2, both ending up being nothing more than ancient pony ruins, something he'd normally be interested in if the Vex technology wasn't so important to find. Exodus, his ghost asked through his helmet comms. How are you? I'm fine, why do you ask? Exodus responded, swerving a little to avoid some boulders. It's what's going through your head. The traveler needs us more than these ponies do. Exodus grunted a little, moving his hands a bit to get a better grip on the handles. I have to disagree. Very little could bring the vanguard down at this point. They aren't the weak, funnel hope they once were. His ghost didn't respond for a while. I still don't think we should stay here and abandon the traveler. Wouldn't call it abandoning, Exodus said, his tone unchanging. I suppose it just depends on how you see the traveler. Some claim it to be a god, others see it as a curse. I've seen some people agreeing on the idea that it only cares for itself. Surely you don't think of it that way, the ghost said almost incredulously. Naturally, otherwise I wouldn't be a very good guardian. I still believe we should be helping those that can't help themselves. That's what we were doing in the city, no? Exodus looked to the right slightly, at where he correctly guessed his ghost was floating invisibly. There's no way I can convince you to go back, is there? His ghost sighed. Not right now, no. In the future, providing the ponies can care for themselves, I might go back. Until then, I've got a job to do. The duo fell back into silence as the distant mountains came into view. He would have preferred to fly there, but Twilight had advised him against it. The area was relatively close to dragon territory, and it wasn't likely that they would take an unknown flying machine flying into their borders lightly. Upon arriving, Exodus swiftly dismounted his sparrow, allowing his ghost to send it back up to the galliot as he began surveying the area. It was the peak of the mountain, quite flat, all this considered. Near the center was the mountain. A few familiar structures could be seen propped out of the ground. Half buried by the probable millennia, they had been lying dormant. He rushed over, quickly getting to work checking the remains. They were Vex tech for sure, but the area didn't make much sense to him. He expected them to be buried deep on the ground, not left out in the open like this. Think they're usable? He questioned his companion, trying to dig at the stones to test his strength. The Vex designed these portals to last all of time, but that's all I can really bank on. I should be able to get something out of it, providing the lower section of the frame hasn't been destroyed. When the stones didn't budge to his partially gentle knocks, Exodus stood. How long would it take to check? That entirely depends on how tough the mountain is. If it's soft enough to dig through, I'm sure our titans wouldn't have any issue getting the portal frames back up to the surface. Perfect, the Guardian nodded. Bring the team here. We have plenty of work to do. An hour later, the team had arrived and were caught up. Curvis, still a little wobbly but demanding that he help, had bought a pickaxe with him, using Prochor's ghost to call his ship from orbit. The Titan got to work shifting the stones from around the frame of the portal. Elena and Exodus stood to the side to begin observing the portal, making sure no damage was accidentally given to it. Won't lie, I really thought we weren't going to reach this point, Elena commented, doing her best to watch the portal, though both she and Exodus knew she wouldn't be able to see damage to a structure she didn't understand very easily. I can understand that. It gets easier to predict how wars will go, trust me, Exodus responded. Sounds a lot like the other advice I've been given, Elena said, keeping her focus on the portal. Exodus chuckled. It's how Curvis was when he taught me. Not sure about Prochor, of course. The hunter spared a glance at Curvis, who had taken the upper body of his under armor off at some point. What kind of person was he? Mission focused, completely humorless. Khalees would drive him insane sometimes, but he's always been a good friend, and even better teammate. He said, looking down at her for a moment. Why do you ask? I'm still a little worried he won't like me being the hunter of the fire team. He'll be fine. You're not trying to be Khalees. You're trying to fill the now empty slot in our team. If anything, I think he'll be grateful that I wasn't a hunter from the Crucible, Exodus explained, returning his focus to the portal. He has something against hunters in the Crucible? Personal grudges against them. They, use cheap one-shot tactics, apparently. I never did enjoy the idea of fighting other guardians, so I wouldn't know. Elena giggled. I think he just doesn't appreciate real power. Exodus shrugged. As I said, wouldn't know. By this point, the portal had been mostly unearthed, Prochor doing most of the heavy lifting, with Curvis helping to clear the hole of loose debris. Even from their distance from the hole, Elena and Exodus could clearly see some of the portal had survived the test of time, thankfully. Looks like it's my turn, Exodus said, heading over to the Titans. Elena followed him over, waving a little to Curvis and Prochor as they sat down a little ways away. Prochor making sure the now winded Curvis didn't collapse as they left the hole. Prochor waved back, but Curvis was too tired to even notice. She slid into the hole, looking the portal over closely. Dust and residual stone still clung inside the frame, and the base was still on the ground. So, how do we get this thing working? Exodus's ghost appeared as he responded. Not sure, really. We got a lot of data from the vault of glass a few years back, but there's no guarantee any of it will work. Can't we just give it a kick? I've seen that work before with machinery. Kick the only known Vex portal on the planet? I'd rather not. Though I'm sure there's someone here who would love to vent some anger on a poor, aged piece of tech.
Exodus finished by looking over at Procore, who was helping Curvis get the top section of his under armor back on. Elena smiled. Good point. But I still think a gentle love tap would go a long way. Exodus huffed a little. Maybe. Let's try some non-hostile methods first. His ghost was already working on trying to get the portal to work, inputting various streams of code he had gleaned during their brief time in the vault. A few minutes of silent waiting passed before the ghost turned back to Exodus. I put everything I got into it. I got a response from a few, but clearly it's not enough. Then try the ones you got a response from again, Elena said, edging closer to the portal. I don't really see how trying it again would help, but if it makes you happy, I suppose I can oblige. The little machine responded, going back to the portal. As he began inputting codes once more, Elena gave the side of the frame a swift kick. The metal rang a little, large chunks of stone falling from it as a flickering portal lit up on the center of the frame. Elena immediately fell to the floor, clutching her foot. See? She managed to get out through gritted teeth. Worked like a charm. Exodus sighed. Well, you got it working, I'll give you that. Need some help? The hunter just groaned, letting her ghost heal her foot enough for her to stand, accepting Exodus's help in getting up. Thanks. So, I'm guessing it's not meant to flicker like that? It's been buried in rock for some time, so it's really not surprising, the warlock explained, turning to his ghost. Think you can keep it open long enough to send Procore back? The ghost nodded. Should be able to, though he won't have long to get through. Good. Exodus turned his head again, this time looking up at Procore, who was now standing at the side of the hole. Ready to go? I've been ready since we killed Veal, Procore replied, jumping down beside them, getting closer to the portal's surface. Well, this looks safe. My ghost will keep it open long enough for you to get through. After that, you're on your own. There's no telling where this will drop you, Exodus explained. I'm sure the Vanguard will pick me up eventually. If not, I'll find a way back home. Exodus hummed. Glad you have more faith in their ability than I do. Good luck, Procore. And thanks for being with us during this. Procore gave Exodus' shoulder a friendly pat, smiling as he put his helmet on. Good fighting with you. Maybe we'll see each other again. Hopefully under better circumstances, Exodus said, nodding a little. The Titan gave a short laugh, turning back to the portal. All right, I'm ready. See you on the other side, you two. Same to you. Ghost? Exodus's ghost responded by opening the portal, spreading his segments out as he worked to keep the portal stable. As soon as the flickering ended, Procore stepped through, his ghost following. With no reason to keep the portal open, Exodus's ghost let it go back to its previous state, sparks flying from the back of the frame. Only moments later, the portal shut down completely, a few bits of metal falling to the ground. Well, I guess that's that, Elena said, looking at the now smoking portal. It is. Come on. There's no chance this thing will work again, Exodus replied as he climbed out of the hole, helping Elena up when he got out. Curvis was still sat nearby, though looking better than he did. Sounds like everything went off without a hitch, Curvis muttered, still catching his breath. As far as I'm aware, yes. Now, let's get you to a doctor. I've no idea how you convinced me into letting you overwork your body in this state, but you won't change my mind now, the warlock scolded, helping his friend up and calling for his ship. I wasn't going to sit idly by and let you guys do all the work for me. I might be just human now, but I gotta feel useful somehow, Curvis said, his voice still quiet. There'll be plenty of time for that when you're not collapsing after a few minutes of hard work. Bed rest and medical attention is all you need right now. Curvis just grumbled, not looking up as the galleot arrived, taking them on board as soon as it was able and flying them back towards civilization. When his ship was nothing more than a faint blue dot A floating Vex machine appeared, briefly masked by a black shadow. It looked over the portal carefully, its single blue eye moving to see everything it could from its socketed position. "This only delays my plans, Guardian," it said to nobody in particular. "You haven't beaten me yet." 4 days later. Curvis stood silently on a hill, looking up at the mountain that Canterlot once stood on. Before him was a freshly made grave with a coffin at the bottom. The only other person with him was Lemon, who had helped him to find what remained of Khalees from beneath the concrete that still lay around the fields at the base of the mountain. There wasn't much, as most of it was still under a few 100 tons of city. But there was enough to bury, at least. Exodus joined him after a few minutes, having been delayed by Breeze wanting to come with him. He stood beside his friend, though his gaze was down at the coffin. "Have any words?" Curvis didn't respond for a moment, thinking of what to say. "No, I've already said mine." Exodus looked at him for a short while before nodding. "Right. Well, we should get this thing filled. She wouldn't want us sitting around all glum." Ned drew a chuckle from the Titan as he grabbed a shovel from nearby. "No, she wouldn't. Care to help?" "Of course. What kind of guardian would I be if I didn't?" Curvis raised his hands a bit. Point taken. "There's a shovel over there for you." He gestured to the tool, getting to work. The filling of the grave was silent from there, neither finding it right to speak while doing something like that. Curvis had recovered greatly since the fight with Vael, not even breaking a sweat as he shoveled dirt into the grave. When the job was done, Curvis picked up Khalees's broken telesto from behind the grave, the only weapon they could salvage. He placed it against the small headstone, remaining crouched there for a short time. Exodus, taking notice of the time Curvis was spending there, left to head back to the bunker, leaving him and Lemon without another word. Curvis and Lemon sat motionless for many hours, exchanging occasional small talk about Khalees, but mostly remaining silent to remember her as they knew her. Lemon finally gave him a gentle poke on the leg.
"Curvis, I hate to make you move, but the others will be expecting us back. I doubt Breeze or Elena will be happy if you miss the celebrations."
"I know. Why don't you head back to the Vienna? I won't be much longer," Curvis said, smiling at her a little and stroking her mane. Lemon nodded, heading back to the ship and leaving him alone. Curvis's attention turned back to the telesto. "Suppose that's the end of it, huh? Hope you're happy wherever you are." He stood slowly, giving a slight nod to the headstone, heading back to the ship and returning to the bunker with Lemon, his mind finally at rest for the first time since they arrived. And this concludes the final chapter to Fireteam Odium, written by Atronos the Last. Well, everyone, like I said, we have finally come to the end of our journey. And now I'd like to end it off by reading the author's note. It says, "And there it is, the culmination of 2 years of waiting. I want to deeply apologize for the time this took to finish. Really shouldn't have taken that long. That aside, however, I want to thank each and every one of you, from the people that supported me on day one to the people that hated the story. You all have been the reason this story was even ever finished, and I'm happy to have finally finished this thing. I made a promise to you that I'd finish it, and I'm glad I could uphold that. There may be a sequel to this story, which should probably be obvious. The sequel would certainly not be something I write quickly. I've learned my lesson from this story, but at least it's something to look forward to, right? Thank you all for the support in writing this. I also want to personally thank Lotus for her work in reading this story over the last year. You're doing a great job, so keep it up. Aww. See ya in the sequel. Hopefully. Stay awesome." Again, I too want to apologize for the fact that this took me so long to read. As I stated when I was approached about reading this story, it was not finished. So, of course, I had to wait some time for it to be finished. But by the time I would have gotten up to the point where it had stopped, I was really nowhere near that. So, yeah. And then when it was finished, I put it off for too long, and I'm only just finishing it now. Oh, yeah, it's been a long road. And if there's a sequel, I'm not 100% sure if I'll read that. Not because I wouldn't want to, but because there's just still so much I still have on my plate from other stories that I have had on the back burner for, oh goodness, since the start of my channel, to still needing to finish off Inverno, to other stories that I do want to read. So it would be a big if for me reading the sequel if it does come to fruition. But other than that, I hope you all enjoyed this video and this reading and look forward to more content that I put out. For right now, I am Lotus Moon, and I want to wish you all a good morning, afternoon, evening, or night wherever you are, every pony. Good night.